the previous videos, we mentioned about the literature review. It is basically a comprehensive study and interpretations of literature which is related to your research topic. The purpose of doing the literature review is for you to identify your research questions and also seek answer for these questions by searching for and analyzing relevant literature using a systematic approach. So far, we have covered several questions that you may ask yourself during the literature review. We also mentioned that the literature review can be done in two stages, which include what the literature said and how it is related to your research. Also, we mentioned about different methods of organizing your literature review, which is very much dependent on your purpose of writing your literature review, using the methods most easily in helping you to achieve those purposes. In terms of the writing style, we know that the concept-centered writing style it will be more effective in delivering the content, concepts, theories, principles, and findings as acquired from the literatures. It is easier to engage the reader throughout your literature review chapter. And then it was mentioned that you need to remain critical throughout your review process. You do not necessarily always agree with the opinions given by the respective researchers. We also briefly mentioned about the areas where you can critique. However, it is noted that when you do the critique during your literature review, make sure you write it in the formal and professional manner, not to make it very personalized, and you have to be careful with the selections of the terminology while you are doing the critiques. You need to be objective and be respectful to the opinions given by the respective authors of the literatures. So far, what we have covered regarding the literature review are more towards the conceptual, such as the theories, concepts, findings as given by the different researchers. In the research articles, not only the discussions and findings worth reading, different researchers conduct their own experimental program or their study program, which will lead to them their data and results for them to acquire understanding, findings, and conclusions. Other than identifying the findings in the mode of the conceptual, consolidating these findings, synthesizing them, and integrating them together in order to yield your own conclusions and findings out of the literature review. You may also play around with the data presented by the researchers. Sometimes you will observe several identical research using the similar testing methods, trying to study different conditions for a research topic. You see that those literatures are standalone. That means their emphasis are on their own research. However, you do not see the linkage between them, as it is not explained by either of the researchers, which you are pretty sure and convinced that if you analyze and study both research together, probably through some mechanism of merging the data or analyzing certain data using one single standards or an analysis process, it will yield you new findings which are not covered by both of them. Or probably you just want to know whether there is any correlations between two different conditions under the same research topic. Therefore, it is possible for you to use their data going through a recomputation process, analyzing both sets of data together in order to acquire new findings. This process is known as the meta-analysis. More specifically, it is a statistical technique to combine the data on the size of a measured effect from different published sources in order to produce an estimated or overall effect size. Simply put, what you are doing actually is using the data given by author A together with the data given by author B, which you have done through some preliminary screening, knowing that both sets of data can be merged or analyzed together. Then you would like to see the outcome. So adopting both data for your own study as a part of the literature review is actually doable, which could give you insights beyond what is claimed by the respective researchers. However, this meta-analysis is very dependent upon the quality of the systematic review that produce the data to be combined. That means if you want to do this, you really need to be careful, and the finding as acquired from this meta-analysis, it will be very much dependent on the quality of your systematic review. And you need to aware that there could be bias in the meta-analysis. For example, due to the selection bias or publications bias, you will presume yourself while combining the data by two researchers, your coverage will be bigger. Whichever finding there is most likely applicable to the scope slightly greater than their individual sources. However, this can still be biased unless you are able to identify all the relevant data published by all the relevant publications, and you have the ability to merge everything at one go. Then you will know that your analysis result will be more reliable. However, you know that this is nearly impossible. The reason being is the research projects are normally unique. It is unique in the sense of the research design, the research method, probably the testing program, the size and dimensions of the specimens, the specifications of the material used, the setup of the loads, the boundary conditions, the assumptions. There are all sorts of factors which can lead to the research carried out by a person different from another person. It is possible for you to merge the data and recompute them. However, theoretically speaking, when you want to do the merging, you will have to make sure all the data are coming from the same conditions. This is to prevent errors or bias, which has already factored in the slight variations in the parameters used in producing the results and data. Therefore, I would say that it is good for you to do the meta-analysis. This will broaden your coverage, or you can use it for further verification purposes. However, you might not be able to 100% fully believe in it, because you are talking about data coming from different sources, which by nature or by their governing factors, they may not be fully identical. It will be a good reference system for you, but you will have to use it carefully. This brings to our next point, which you do not attempt to combine the data from dissimilar studies. In order for you to combine the data, you need to make sure most of the parameters, the setup, the conditions are more or less the same. Even though there are differences, the differences shouldn't be too significant. Definitely, you cannot combine the data from different studies, which in terms of nature and conditions very significantly vary from each other, as the outcome of your meta-analysis will mislead you in your interpretations and findings later. Of course, there is another trick for you, which you can go through a certain processing process, trying to normalize certain different factors that governing the data. For example, this can be done by removing the influence of certain parameters, such as dividing the data or the results with a non-parameters, so that the data from both sources, even though they are made of different set of the parameters, since that the parameters has been removed, then you can still do comparison apple to apple. I'm not sure, do you really get the point that I was making? Maybe I give you an example. Let's say now you are studying a lightweight concrete, where you have the result of the density or the weight of the concrete, as well as the strength of the concrete. You encounter both data from two different researchers, only that the concrete strength that they are using are different. Both are doing the lightweight concrete. The study was similar. The setup also similar, based on the typical setup as recommended by the standards. Now the major difference, it will be the concrete strength. Now your problem here is you cannot combine both data due to the differences of the concrete strength. However, you can still make comparison by removing the strength factor, probably by creating a new ratio representing the efficiency, probably in the ratio of weight per strength, and both sets of data are used to compute those weight over strength. Then you may make direct comparison for both studies based on the ratio of weight over strength. This is one of the examples that you can do by normalizing some different parameters, keeping those which is similar, so that you can make direct comparison. However, if you want to use this technique, you will have to use it carefully. You need to confirm the relationships of those different parameters, as well as the significance of those parameters, and you have to remove those parameters either by dividing it or multiplying it. Some may involve minusing it. This one, it will be up to your conditions. And in order for you to go through this recomputation process, you need to outline it clearly, justifying it in your literature review. Next, let us look at the conditions where the meta-analysis can be applied. First, you need to make sure the data of the study are homogeneous. If the data of the studies are not homogeneous, you may still do the meta-analysis, but the reliability of the outcomes and the findings may be questionable. You might want to check if the study design are different, if the samples of the subject vary between the trial or studies, if the outcome measures are different, or if the quality or the size of the study is different. If you realize that there are inhomogeneous within the set of data that you intend to do meta-analysis, first you will need to have an idea how much is the implications to your analysis result. If it is very significantly going to influence your result, you might need to exclude them from the meta-analysis. These are several checklists that you can do when you intend to do the meta-analysis. Are the effect size reported in each publication the same? Does the variability report in the result effect size suggest they are from the homogeneous populations? Is the summary of the data produced by your meta-analysis meaningful? It is very dependent on your directions and the purpose of the meta-analysis. The size of the samples or coverage regions may also lead to undesired skewing towards the data set which is significantly larger than the others. Let's say now you have a data set from author 1 consisting 30 set of specimens, and then you find another author, author B, having the data of only 5 specimens. If you intend to merge the data, and you might want to know the likelihood or with the intentions to find the mean, you know that the statistical outcome, it will be skewing more towards the bigger set of data. This may lead to you certain bias in terms of the finding. These are the things that you might want to consider. Personally, I will approach this in the manner that I am not really concerned much in terms of the statistical measurement. When I decide to analyze something, merging some data, I know the data size is inconsistent. Some may give me more data, while the other may give me less. My focus of study or analysis should not be in the directions of the statistical measures. It should more or less towards some degree of likelihood. Instead of finding the mean or standard deviations, probably I'm looking for the maximum and minimum value. Or my focus, it will be more to the qualitative outcome. How many percent of those data fulfill certain requirements? What are the reasons that the requirements are fulfilled? And what are the common characteristics of the data among those cannot fulfill the requirement? The focus are more towards the qualitative type instead of some statistical numbers. Personally, I would encourage my students to do some meta-analysis. Of course, on the basis that the meta-analysis is necessary. I would say that it is more difficult to handle because you have to acquire the data from the research conducted by the other researchers, look into their research design and assumptions, probably going through a process for you to remove certain governing factors that are different among different researchers before you can use them together to be analyzed in the same methods. And then I am also not really concerned about the exact numbers as acquired from the meta-analysis. It is more or less to the qualitative type of findings, trying to find a certain observable trends or the achievement of certain applications or identifying the limits of certain things and so on so far, rather than focusing on the means, standard deviations, 95% percentiles, and so on so forth. Bear in mind that this meta-analysis is meant for you to have an overview of the topics that you are studying, rather than a specific numbers. Knowing the limitations and the disadvantage of the meta-analysis, it will be helpful for you to avoid undesired misleading in terms of the finding which will affect your research study.